Hey, it's your buddy Peace and Harmony with you here today. Learned helplessness and codependence, how this interweaves into the overt and covert narcissistic abuse cycle that is so damaging and so disruptive in so much of our society today. Codependence is a situation, it is not a disorder per se, but it's a situation where a person feels that their life purpose is solely that of taking care of the emotional, physical, spiritual, psychological needs of another, to the detriment of living their own life. In other words, having someone else at the center of their life in every single thing that they do, think, say, and really to the point where they're sacrificing, they're self-effacing themselves. They're devoiding really their own interests, their own personal development. They're stunting a lot of their growth in order to take care of or really enable in others. And codependence has received a lot of popularity in the literature. It's received a lot of attention because it's so prevalent. It's like it's the ultimate nurturer, it's the ultimate caregiver, it's the ultimate do-gooder, is the codependent. How does the codependent, though, look in terms of their relationship with the narcissist, be it overt, covert, and then learned helplessness? How does this all interweave together? Well, the codependent and the narcissist are a perfect match because the narcissist live solely to satisfy their own needs in just one simple statement. The codependent lives to satisfy the needs of another. That's their life purpose. However, I want to look at the abuse that maybe begins early in the relationship and creates a codependent inside that relationship, and how that is maybe created. And once I think you learn how this is in fact created, you can then unlearn the behavior, unlearn the emotion, unlearn the situation, so you're no longer living in the footsteps of your former self, which is the codependent. Now, learned helplessness is a paradigm in psychology, whereas, and this applies to both people as well as to animals, where there's a learned helplessness. And it really is quite simple. It's just how it sounds. It's learned to be helpless. Learned, which is a verb, past, is something you learned. In other words, it wasn't the original you. It was not the initial you. It's something that you picked up. It's a habit that you learned that's perpetual, ongoing, and chronic. And then helpless, which is an emotional state. Okay, it's an adjective. It's describing you as a person. It's a descriptor. And, as a person, that person is a noun. It's a being. But the we can have many adjectives describing us. We're positive, bubbly, effervescent, quiet, serene, passive, aggressive, helpless, empowered. These are all adjectives. An objective is something we want to be. That's our objective. That's our goal. And we can have different goals in our life and to change kind of who we are as people. And your personality is really made up of how you think, how you feel, and how you behave. Those three things. That's your personality. People can change their personality. And a lot of it depends on your desire to change, your motivation to change, and how serious you are, if you're interested or if you're committed to changing. If you're committed to changing, that means you absolutely positively want it to be so. You usually, hit commitment to change after you've hit rock bottom. I'd kind of like to change things around here. I'd kind of like things to be different. I'm interested, versus like, I'm committed. This is it. I've had enough. I'm done. I'm changing. I'm moving on. I'm moving my house. I can't live in this situation anymore. I'm committed. I'm actually taking action and I'm going there. Now, learned helplessness is a situation where someone has experienced so much oppression, so much resistance, so much retaliation, and so much failure that they have tried and they've tried and they've tried and they've tried. So the effort has been there, the initiative has been there, the desire has been there. They've tried so many times, the word try, which means I made an effort but failed, or was defeated. Something else resulted from the situation other than what was desirable or what was intended. And I now feign and become helpless. Helpless, which is powerless. We think of like a helpless child. They are unable to help themselves. A helpless puppy. They are unable to eat. They're unable to, get their own dinner. They're unable to make food for themselves. They're helpless in that situation. They cannot do anything about it. The helpless, just the helpless penguin, who's maybe, stuck in an iceberg, who can't get out, in between, two glaciers or whatever. Like, he's helpless, like he needs some help. They need help to get out of that situation. Well, being in an emotionally abusive situation with either a covert or overt narcissist, we can discuss both types here, they do apply. Being caught up in a situation, a syndrome, a symptom of, being a codependent, having fallen into a role with them where you're taking care of them, you're blind to the abuse because you've maybe been in the situation for so long. It's found that, this codependency, this enabling situation where you're neglectful of yourself, you're self-defacing, which means you're neglecting yourself, you're basically literally taking your own self out of the relationship, you're defacing yourself, you're it's almost a very crippling situation. It's not almost, it is crippling situation where you're so oppressed, you're so shut down that you've learned to become helpless. You've tried to speak up so many times before. You've made the effort to be on equal footing so many times before, but their needs have always prevailed and come out on top. You've learned to be helpless. You've learned to fall down and stay down. You've learned to backslide and stay sliding down. You've learned to be repressed and stay repressed. And that is the energetic feeling of depression, where you feel so apathetic now. You've tried so many times, you no longer try anymore. You never tried, you stopped trying to resolve the situation. You stopped trying to apply to school. You stop trying to apply to that job. You essentially give up. That is learned helplessness. And, there's been studies shown, I think his name is Dr. Steigelman out of University of Pennsylvania, where he looked at this learned behavior, maladaptive as it were, in dogs who were held down or in some sort of leash of some sort or bridle of some sort, where they were then shocked. And of course, if you experience an electrical shock, dog, pet, or human, you're going to flinch. You're going to try to get away. You're going to take your hand off of that electric shock. Now, the dog who was free to move, would jump over that barrier, who would jump over that hurdle and get away and free themselves from that shock. Now, the dog who was bridled down and couldn't, get up, basically would continue to try, but then, once they realized that there was this harness on them, they just stopped trying, and they just basically gave up, and they sat there and they would whine and they would continue to relieve this very painful electric shock. But what they found was that even when the harness was removed, that dog, who had learned to be helpless in that situation, Even though there was no harness on them, they just stay and they lay down and they continue to whine and suffer that electric shock. That is the definition of learned helplessness. Same thing goes in people, where even though there's opportunity for them to succeed or create a new relationship or go out on their own and remove the barriers, whatever is holding them back physically, emotionally, mentally, they have learned helplessness, and so they just give up. And that is really what happens in codependence, is they fall into this depressive role with these people, and they feel like they can never be another person, they can never have another identity. And looking at incorporating or integrating this in the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza, very interesting book called Breaking the Habit of Being Myself, which I'm just picking up now and reading. He also has a wonderful book out called The Placebo Effect. But he talks about how the brain itself can relearn. And our brain has a neuroplasticity, which means that it has an ability to change. If something is plastic, that means it's malleable, it's changeable, it can be changed. So the brain works, and I remember studying this in psychology, in that there's the cells within the brain are called neurons. Just like we have cells in our heart are a specific type of cell, the cells in our lungs are a specific type of cell, in our skin, epidermal cells. Our cells are constantly growing and dying, being reborn and dying, I think to the tune of like 10 million a second. I mean, it's absolutely phenomenal. It's awe-inspiring when we really think about the life of our cells and how our cells die and then repair and regrow themselves. The same thing is happening with neurons, which are the cells of the brain. And when we learn something, the cells fire. They fire off almost like a little mini gun. They set out a little bit of fluid, which is called neurotransmitter, and then connects to another cell, which connects to another whole bunch of cells, and it creates a reaction. And that is how the brain begins to ignite or create thoughts and messages into the body, and how it creates emotions in that same manner. A lot of it is done unbeknownst to us, just automatically for us, by virtue of our subconscious mind. And that's what runs our heart rate, our breathing, our digestion. It's all done in this very elaborate and sophisticated system, which is within the subconscious mind. Now, in neuroplasticity, we can learn, and we can relearn, and we can recreate new neural pathways or new wiring and firing of these little cells in here. Not crazy, that's the activity. We can create new activity within the mind to create new feelings within the body, which is in turn creating new thoughts, new ideas, new behaviors, and new actions, which in turn create a new identity. It's very powerful. It's very complicated. Not very complicated, but it's there's a couple moving parts to it, which I definitely plan to discuss and utilize as a good tool for you all to help. And if we can explain this and expound this in this channel, I think it'll be very useful for you. But for this video here, this piece here, I want you to understand that this depression, this learned helplessness, can be unlearned. It can be unlearned. It can be unprogrammed. It can be forgotten. It can be unmemorized. It can be basically eradicated or extinguished with healthier, more empowering, more productive, more proactive thoughts, emotions, feelings, and behaviors, and then creating that, what Dr. Joe Dispenza calls empowerment, which is living into a new identity, which is bringing yourself into a new awareness and getting out of that funk, out of that depression, out of that disempowering, maladaptive state that you call unhappiness. It becomes a conscious choice. And it is bringing to your awareness that I hope to accomplish here for you, to realize that your role with this person, with the narcissist, that you had learned, that you had been trained by this person to become in that situation. You can untrain yourself and you can retrain yourself to choose happiness, which is an emotional state, which is more desirable and a lot more fun than being depressed and unhappy and distrustful and fill in the blank, not going anywhere in your life. We can relearn this. So realize that this helpless, depressive backseat feeling that you have can be unlearned, and we can reprogram and put in place more empowering thoughts. And right now, just to give you a little taste of it, is I want you to, for a moment, just think of a very happy time for you. Maybe you were on vacation, maybe it was as a child, maybe it was getting your college diploma, maybe it was graduating from your high school, maybe it was building your first automobile, maybe it was one of your first fishing trips, maybe it was writing your first poem, building your first wagon, your first toy. It's something that was a very positive and rewarding experience for you. You can call that to memory, bring that memory up, and kind of the happiness and joy that you felt that you had gotten there. If you're codependent, maybe you didn't believe that you had gotten there, but you actually did. You weren't giving yourself credit. But pull up that emotion for a moment, pull up that thought, and start to register some of the positive feelings. That's the power of your imagination, that's the power of your mind, bringing that new feeling, a new thought into your body. Those are the type of feelings and thoughts that we want to pull up consciously on a more regular basis, so you can begin to function there on more of a day-to-day manner and a little bit lighter sort of mood for you. And so you can begin to focus on things that we've been discussing in your recovery journal and get those happier, more positive, empowered states into your everyday life versus that learned helplessness. And realize you can indeed help yourself and live more empowered. Peace and harmony here with you here today. Hope these videos help. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today on this, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Please share and subscribe for more great tools, videos, discussions, and support. Make it a beautiful day.